Welcome to the Rock Your Comeback podcast. I'm Nicole Eaton, author of the books Rock Your Soul and Rock Your Comeback, as well as an intuitive therapist, and I'm here to remind you of your power. This podcast focuses on mindset and inviting the universe in to create a life that feels so good, so aligned, and so authentic. I hope you're ready. Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Rock Your Comeback podcast. I'm your host, Nicole Eaton. This episode is so unique and so raw. This is a conversation I was able to have with one of my best friends from grad school, who is one of the most creative and interesting people I've ever met. She's always there if I need a new perspective, and I think she's going to give you guys a brilliant new perspective in this podcast episode. And I'm also here to remind you that upcoming in February 23rd through the 26th is the Quantum Glow Up Retreat. If you are looking to make a massive change in your life this year and you need a good reset, we're spending a whole weekend just getting your energy into a place where you can make quantum leaps in your life, where you can manifest something incredible for yourself, clear out the past, and reset for a brand new year. It is not too late to join us, so make sure you check out the link in the show notes, and I hope you enjoy this episode. If you do, please let me know by sharing with a friend, tagging me in it, or leaving a review. Thanks. Welcome back to the Rock Your Comeback podcast. I'm your host, Nicole Eaton, and today I have a really special guest that I'm still in awe that she agreed to do this, because this girl is somebody who I go to when I need a new perspective on life. She's just a naturally creative, interesting person who probably doesn't think that she's those things, but I just deeply value her friendship, and I know that whatever comes up in this conversation today is going to be valuable for anybody who's listening. So I'm going to welcome one of my favorite humans on the planet, Nicole Bondellio.
Hi, Nicole.
Hi. Thanks for agreeing to this. This is going to be fun.
Yeah, I'm here. I'm ready to have a blast. I can't say no to you, so I'm here.
That's my favorite thing about our friendship. I think so Nicole and I met back in grad school. You were going for school counseling. I was going for mental health counseling. And it's really interesting, I think, like if we're talking about the idea of like comebacks, when you're friends with somebody for so long and you have so many different versions of yourself, I think it's really cool to maintain a friendship with somebody that you get to see all the different variations of them. And like, if we're talking about comeback, like I've watched you make like at least 85 comebacks in your life.
Yeah, we met at a transformative time. I was actually thinking about that today because I had gone for a run and I listened to your post this morning on Instagram, like right before. And I was like, oh, like we're doing this today. Like, should I think about things to say? Like, should I think about our friendship? Like, what should I do? And I was thinking about how when we met, like we are completely different people since then. And it was a little over 10 years ago now. And just allowing space for each other in that time is something I have really valued. Like you've just like accepted me every step of the way. And I think similarly for you. So it's just been an incredible friendship and one of my favorites.
I'm going to ruin your life a little bit and say that it is actually going on 14 or 15 years.
No, don't say that. No.
Yeah, and the only reason I know this is because I gave birth to Kylie a week after graduating with my master's degree. So we met 2 years prior to that, and she's going to be 13 this year.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
My 20th high school reunion is this year. So I guess that makes sense.
Yeah. I think that one of my favorite things about you is that you're just a really gifted storyteller. And I just remember the story you told at Clarity Connects about getting your blood drawn.
Yep.
Can we revisit that just for my personal sake?
Yes. Okay. So this was the first time I gave blood. And I was, I think, like a sophomore or junior in college. So this is like a pretty tough, I'll give actually a little bit more context than I even did at Clarity Connects. So I was in the closet at this point. I was having like a secret relationship that was really taxing. I was coming to terms with my sexuality, which was really, really tough. And I would get up and I would probably run close to like 10 to 12 miles a day at that point. And I was over exercising, also playing college soccer. So I think I'd probably run in the morning, wasn't eating much, struggled with some eating things, really like to control like everything in my life, and went to soccer practice in the afternoon and then stopped to give blood right before I went to have dinner in the dining hall. So I go in and I give blood. I'm one of the last people there. They draw my blood. And then as I'm leaving, like I am a little disoriented because I'm, malnourished at this point. And they mentioned go have cookies, go in this direction. And instead of walking in that direction, I just walked towards the door. And so on my way out, I can feel like my body just draining, and I completely lost sense of time. I lost my footing, and I woke up, and I think it was like a minute or two later to people like staring down at me. And I was like, they're like, you passed out, like you almost seized, like you need to get something in your body, you like need to eat cookies or whatever. I'm like, okay, okay. And I'm laying there and I can feel like underneath me, like it's wet. And I'm thinking like I'm nervous, I'm sweating. And I look down and I'm like, oh my God, like I peed myself. And I'm sitting here at this like very insecure time in my life. And the nurse bends over and she asks, like, um, are you, did you like, I don't think she fully even said it. And I looked at her, I'm like, I'm just very sweaty. Like, no, absolutely
So
not. So
sweaty.
yeah. And so I totally just like I kind of like moved my body around with my sweats and just like, but I totally peed myself. And it could have been really embarrassing, but you just like, I guess you kind of roll with it. I had some cookies, I went to the dining hall. But yeah, so I gave blood for the first time, passed out, peed my pants, and I've actually never given blood again.
Trauma.
Yeah.
You
I
know,
should probably do that this year.
this is your sign that someone's
Yeah.
someone's got to, and it's got to be you. Just
Yeah.
this is your chance to like, make your comeback and not piss yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. I take much better care of myself. I will eat cookies before and after. So
Yeah. It's funny because like one of like my core memories, and I don't know if this is right or wrong, but one of my core memories was when we were newly, like we had just started to connect, and our cohort for our grad school was so small. There was probably like 11 people, 10
yeah. Yeah.
people. So, I mean, we're for 2 years straight just up each other's ass. In counseling school, they make you do all of these really vulnerable things. Like you are counseling each other, you're practicing on each other, you're opening up to each other in different ways. And I just remember like maybe a couple months after we started hanging out, I was like in my car and I was getting ready to leave campus, and you like ran up to my window and you knocked on it, and I rolled my window down. Do you remember this?
I think so. Did I
Yeah.
get in the car?
No, you just
Oh, okay, this is a
I
different
rolled
time.
the window down and you stood there for a second, and I'm like, "What's up?" And you just stood there for a second and you're like, "I'm bisexual and I just wanted you to know." And it was like, "Okay, cool." Like, okay.
No, I
Um,
don't remember that. No, that's
yeah,
so
no,
fun.
like when I think of you, like I can still remember like the look on your face because you were so scared
Yeah.
like to
Yes.
tell me. And I guess like for anybody, and I think that it doesn't have to be like a sexuality thing when we're talking about embracing our identity, but I'm curious for you, like what was that process like, finding the courage to be yourself?
Oh God. That took a long time. It's still in process really because going through um coming out, I guess like the typical like coming out story and finding your identity also, especially when you're not straight and you can't like do the normal trajectory of life. You are constantly having to say, this is not everyone's path, this is my path, and that's okay. And so for me, like in grad school, when I was coming out, I mean, I had a lot of childhood stuff. I had religion wrapped up in there. I had sports. Like I played, I think that was one of the like deepest kind of pressure points where I held on to my shame was like in the locker room, because once I recognized my sexuality, I felt like if my teammates ever knew this, they would be disgusted with me. And I felt disgusted with myself. So like that in itself was very hard. And my identity was an athlete. And so like all of your identity pieces are like coming together in a different way. And our friendships was starting to get closer. And I can remember grad school as a very safe place for me to exercise what is my identity? Am I bisexual? And that was a really great stepping point um, for me, in it's a safe place to land, to say, hey, I'm bisexual, and then eventually no, like I'm gay. And it does give um, that like bisexual identity a little bit of flack too, which is nothing I can speak on behalf of. But yeah, so the identity piece, it's still in process. I think even now I'm in a relationship that I'm very happy with, very like stable in that, but we are creating our own identity, and I'm creating my identity now in probably the first healthy, fully formed relationship that I've had. So yeah, all in process.
Yeah. I just think it's so hard to own your truth with certain things. And obviously, like specifically for this instance, there's all these other people who may or may not have their own religious beliefs or their own backgrounds or their own personal thoughts or feelings about whatever you're doing. And I think, I can't really on the sexuality front, but I can relate on the front of like when I started to access and tap into my intuition. I got hate mail. I mean, I had people, and I still have people in my life who I'm very cautious of because I know that they don't approve of my career. They don't approve of the way that I help people. They don't get it. They think the work is of the devil. Like it's all of these things that for the longest time brought so much shame. And I had to like really sit down and like start to separate like other people's shame from
Mhm.
mine so I
Yeah,
could
that's a good point.
do something with it.
Yeah. No, that's a really good point, because people project their shame too. And so there are relationships that you are in that are very important, say family, for instance, like they are always going to be your family. And there is a projection of like shame, the right way to do things, tradition, and you have to take into account what like my relationship with my mom. Coming out to her was the hardest one for me,
Yeah.
because I knew of her religious background and I knew what she knew of life. And I think like when you live in a small rural place in New York, or we were a military family for a long time, you're in very small communities where historically being gay is not accepted and you just don't talk about it. I knew no gay people until I was in college, I guess, but even then there was one out person I think on campus, because again I put myself in a very small rural place. And so when you talk about other people's shame or other people's like life experience, my mom's life experience also was, it was small. She lived in a rural place, very Catholic. And so I was nervous. I knew she loved me. I never doubted that, but it was like a terrifying thing, and having to parse apart. And it took her a bit. She wasn't like, oh, no problem. I could see her also working through and processing that. And now she's my biggest fan. But like, you have to give, I don't know, it's hard. You have to give people like space and acceptance and understanding. And at the same time, you have to own who you are. And that is such a balancing act, like having to balance your identity of like intuition and what's important to you and the path you wanted to take in your life versus these people are important to me. What are their preconceived notions? How much of this do I keep alive? And like, I'm not a huge fan of cutting people off. And so there's just like so much gray area to that. And it's hard. It's really hard to navigate.
I'm a big fan of cutting people off.
Yeah.
That's fine. That's something that, if I protect my peace quite well with that and
Yep.
really need distance from things that disrupt it. And I think in some ways I've gotten better about that, of just needing things to just be out of sight, out of mind.
And
But
simplified.
Yeah. But, I think when you're in that uncertain phase of like, am I this? Am I that? Is it okay to be this? Is it not okay to be this? Like owning your identity is a fucking beast. Like that's,
Mhm.
I think the hardest thing is like accepting your own truth. What made that easier for you? Or where did you end up where that felt like, fuck it, this is me?
Hmm. That's a really good question. What made it easier and what was like, fuck it, this is me? It was slow. It was very slow. I think I started putting myself in better, more accepting environments. And I think a huge start to that was going to grad school, which I never ended up working in the field that I went to grad school for. But what it gave me, the people that it gave me, the space that it gave me to really work through, and it was just, you can't find a group of more empathetic, kind, understanding listeners than in a school counseling mental health like cohort for a grad school. You just can't. And that to me, I was surrounded by people where I could have conversations that I never had before. So like when I started to come out and say, like I'm bisexual or I'm gay or like I was dating a woman or whatever, people would ask me really interesting things that I never thought about, like, well, what's your type? Like, I remember the first time one of our classmates asked me, oh, well, what's your type? And I was like, no, I've never verbalized this. No one's ever asked me. And that's such a like fifth grade sort of conversation, really, for a lot of people. You think about what's your type. Um, so what made it easier was finding people that I could feel safe with. They didn't have to be the same. They just had to offer safety. And I think that if I think about from that point in grad school and then throughout until this point in my life, that's true for everybody that I've like really kept close in my life. It's safety. It's surrounding yourself with safe people.
Yeah. One of the things I love that you said was it was slow because I think some
Mhm.
people need to know that jumping into acceptance of yourself doesn't have to be like a full body dive in. It can
Mhm.
be dipping your toe in and then dipping your foot in and maybe taking your foot back out and keeping your toe in. And I think that's true about whatever you're accepting about yourself, whatever shame you're getting rid of. I don't know. I just feel like a lot of people needed to hear that.
I think that is one of the things that we forget in every aspect of our life. Like, do we want food? We want it now. We want it fast. We're going to put that post up on social media. We're going to have this thought, and it's just going to, like, we attach ourselves to things so quickly because we get information so quickly now. And it takes a lot of strength to let things marinate, and I think that we forget that that's such a process in life. Like, when you asked me to do this, actually, I was like, I'm really boring right now. Like, what am I going to talk about? Like my life has slowed down for many reasons. I had knee surgery last year. There was a huge shift in the way that I like conceptualized my life. So I was like, what the fuck? Like, I'm boring. And I even texted you this last night. I'm like, I'm boring right now, but that's okay. Like, I think embracing that slowness is where a lot of growth is happening too, and not attaching yourself to ideas too quickly and to people too quickly. And to, I mean, that's also not actually, I'm going to contradict myself for a second, just because there are some things where you need to like quickly make a decision and just go and not let fear hold you up and not let too much of that anxiety or projection into the future hold you up. But being slow in slow moments and embracing it has probably been the thing that has helped me because of my personality type, like the absolute most.
Well, and I know, like, we were chatting through your knee surgery last year, and the thing you probably guys don't know, I mean, she did preference this back in the beginning of like I was, college athlete and all of this stuff. I was running 10 to 12 miles a day. So having knee surgery when your identity, like we're talking all about identity today, because this is a huge part of it. But like when your identity is like, I'm somebody who moves my body, I'm somebody who runs up. I mean, you used to run the fucking craziest things. I remember one time I go to visit Nicole in Massachusetts, and she's like, we're just gonna do this little hike. It's just like a little hike. It's literally up an old ski mountain. It's
Oh
not
yeah.
even it's not even like it's a trail. It's like directly straight up a fucking mountain. And I mean, it was beautiful at the top, but you were just like, let's go. And I'm like dying in the back. So I'm curious for you. I know obviously you're doing a lot better and you were about to kick through a wall the other day with, with your gym workout, but for you with somebody who identifies themselves too as somebody who's like a moving person, somebody who moves their body a lot, what was it like and how did you heal through mentally through this knee surgery? Because I know it was physical healing, but it looked more like emotional too.
Yeah, so the physical piece was the easiest piece, if anything. I mean, there's something that you can tangibly do. There's tons of programs. That part wasn't easy, but it was the easiest. The mental part for me was grueling. Um, it brings up so much, like when you aren't going through a good time, it's bringing up everything. And the way that I learned to heal in my life, or I thought, was running, moving my body, kind of beating myself up in some ways. And I have over the years still moved away from that. Like I wasn't running a ton. I was playing soccer. I was trying to find, I was doing yoga. I was doing more things that weren't so like hateful to my body. Like that hike I took you on, I was right after my divorce for a period of time was doing trail racing and like really tough ones where like you're doing 12 miles of like up and down mountains and by the end you are like crying. um so had moved away from that, but I still was and still am. I mean, that's a piece of me. It's never going to completely go away, but I had to really sit, and that was so tough. I kept a journal because I thought that would be helpful, but all I would do in that journal would just like write crazy scribble. Like I was looking at it the other day, and it was literally just like, "I hate this. This is terrible." Like I couldn't attach myself. Like I had to just sit there, and I would stare out the window for like hours on end. I couldn't even watch TV. Like I was in a very very dark place, and I think the one a silver lining was that healing is just time. So it wasn't going to be like I wasn't there for like 3 years. It was progressive, but again, like I had people in my life that I could lean into, I could text with, I could it the connections for me. And I think the reason that I actually am realizing I'm coming back to surrounding yourself with people that offer you that space to just be your worst is because when I was in the closet, I had no one. I cut everyone out of my life except for the secret relationship that I had. So you can't survive alone. We cannot survive alone. And that's, I guess, the core of like what I'd love to say. Like I was mentally strong through that time and figured out a new way to live and exist that didn't need to like run all the time. But I didn't really. I'm kind of back to that now in some ways. Um, but I've adjusted in a way that like now I go to the gym. I actually have only run one time this week, which is huge. Like that is like ever since I was about 7 years old, I have run almost every single day of my life on top of games and hiking and dog walks and all of that. So I have changed, but I leaned into the people in my life. My mom came to stay, my aunt came to stay for 2 weeks. She would help me shower. And then I had Amanda every single night. By the end of a very long day of me being with myself, I would break down, I would cry. And she just held so much space for me to just be a grumpy little gremlin. Yeah.
I like that you bring up like surrounding yourself with people because I mean it's just so true that when you're at your lowest space having and I think that's one of my favorite things about our friendship is that you've seen me at my fucking worst of worst and still somehow like me, and I think there's something to be said about those types of relationships. When I moved to Charlotte, I had left behind relationships that I had had since third grade. I have always been somebody who has been highly, highly blessed with friends. and just solid friends, like really good people. I am a magnet for really incredible friendships. And then when I moved here, and I'm like, when you move to a new place and you're kind of going on friend dates, I don't know if
Mm-hmm.
you ever had that. Like I was on Bumble BFF. I was like
Yeah.
actively seeking friends because I was like losing my shit. I'm used to meeting up with somebody like once a week and having these really deep, honest, raw conversations. And then I was meeting up with other people. It just got really dark in here. Did you see that?
Yeah.
And I was meeting up with other people, and it was like these surface level, what's your favorite color conversations? And that's just so not who I am as a person. And so when I first moved to Charlotte, like I love this area. I love where I live now. I never loved where I lived before. I love where I live now. I love my house. I love location. I love the weather. I love everything about it. But the first couple of years that I lived here, I was like lonely as fuck. Like I felt like, not that I had to put on a front, but people see like my online presence or see what I do for a living. And I did feel this pressure to have my shit way more together than I normally do. It was like I felt like I couldn't fully be like super expressive about my bad days or like stuff that was going on in my life or my relationship with my mom or whatever that's always been more of a challenge. And so this past year, I've lived here for 5 years now, and this past year we had a Christmas party, and it was like full backyard. Like we do a pool party for Christmas because we live in the South and we can heat over a pool and it's fine. But I'm looking around and I'm like, in 5 years, like I have 50 people in my backyard right now that I've encountered over the last 5 years. Some that have become really incredible, can count on them for anything, relationships, even relationships that I didn't think I would. Like I have a friend who, I mean, I do this work on spirituality in the universe, and one of my favorite people in South Carolina is a atheist. Like just we're very different. And I think that's true what you said about you, is like you and I are very different, but somehow our ability to just show up for each other and like love each other through all of the different variations of ourselves and let it be honest. And I think that's like the big key that creates deeper connection and healing and support when you're in these tough situations, when you're trying to figure out who you are, is having somebody who will just sit and be like, whatever, like
Give
whatever
it to
you
me.
show. Yeah. Like, what's going on, grumpy gremlin? Like what,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
what's the day looking like for you? Like what's on your mind? What are you doing for yourself? Like how are you taking care of yourself? And like friends that ask those kind of questions. And again, it's slow. Like
Slow.
when you're in a new space, when you're leaving old versions of yourself and stepping into new versions of yourself, you might lose people, and that's slow too. Like and so I almost say like the theme of this outside of identity is like embracing the slow.
Embracing the slow. Yeah.
Yeah. And just letting it be okay that it's not an instantaneous fix.
It's not. And it's very hard to. I've moved a lot. I remember you moving, and I remember the BFF Bumble. And I moved as a kid, like I was in 15 different schools before fifth grade, moved a lot still after that. And then in my adulthood, I've moved a bit also. And you kind of attach to people differently in a way when you're moving a lot. You kind of have these like really deep friendships that are short. And so you don't ever have to do like the longevity of the hard stuff. And one of the things I'm starting to value now at this point in my life, and something that you probably hit a lot sooner knowing people from third grade, is you go through shit together.
Yeah.
And you can call at any point in time and just be who you are truly. And that's such a valuable thing in our life. And like, you're fortunate to have that, but you also have to, like, I guess we all have to recognize that it is a two-way street and that most people want to connect that way. We just have to listen to one another of like, what are your needs? Like, how can I show up for you? And how can you show up for me? So when you go through something like knee surgery, you don't have to explain to people what you need at any point in time. But like, we get in relationships, we have career shifts, we move, And sometimes we forget that also friendships are so meaningful and important to like put that time and focus and energy into. And it's not easy. Like that's a really, really tough thing to learn how to do, especially in adulthood, especially through new transitions in your life, especially through moving. Um, but most people do want that. And I will say, like, not everyone's a good fit. You know, some people connect, like, I think the reason you connect with people that are like wide ranging and me too, like, I don't have many friends that are exactly like me. And I think it's just because at the core of it, we just want to have these kinds of conversations, you know? And a lot of people are like that. We just have to like be patient and I guess express it, be like vulnerable in those moments too. You got to lean in.
Can I tell you one of my favorite things that you do that I just deeply appreciate?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, shower
Um,
me.
love.
Yeah.
Um, I I love that anytime you've got something going on, when you text me, you always ask me if I have space for it. And I always do. I always have space for you. I always have space for you. But I appreciate that you just let me think about that because as somebody who is like a recovering people pleaser and a caretaker naturally, it can be really challenging to not be like, yeah, no, I'm available 100% of the time. I don't know if I've ever told you that. I really appreciate that about you.
Thank you for saying that. And I actually, you are someone also, and I think it's a skill that we've learned in the field that we were
Yeah.
educated in, because not everyone asks that. And it does give intent to the type of conversation you're going to have. Also, like you can text back and forth, oh, I had a stink bug and I named him Ralph. You know, like there's light stuff that we have in our life. But when you're going through something and that also calls us into ourselves to check in of like what are we reaching out for, what do we want to talk about, is it serious, and if it is this going to take up some time or some focus or some thought, and recognizing that you don't have access to anyone in your life, don't take that for granted. And that builds, that's a like a two-way street. That also builds rapport, that builds the ability to be like, hey, do you have a minute to have a conversation that's going to get, it's going to go somewhere, you know? And I didn't really think about that. I think it comes naturally now, but it's a really good basic skill that some people to forget about or like maybe haven't learned yet, and that's okay. Like we're all at different points. So yeah, that's a good reminder. Thank you.
Well, and like, just thinking out loud, like last night, we were texting back and forth about bullshit, like just nothing super
Yeah.
important, about stink bugs actually. Cause yeah. Anyway, but
Rest in peace.
if you would have said that to me, I would have been like, I am running around like a crazy person tonight because Cameron has 3 hours of different types of classes and I just made dinner and like I'm gonna go to the gym and like I'm running around. So like even asking somebody, do you have space for this or do you have time? Like I would have been like, let me get back to you when I get home around 9:15. Like
Yeah.
giving people an opportunity to assess where they have space because sometimes we like want to share, and I think this is true because people who are more scared to be vulnerable sometimes approach vulnerable conversations with people who don't have space for them or don't have attention and focus and energy in that moment, and then they spill their guts and they feel rejected or feel like, this didn't go how I thought it was going to go. And so I think that's true about friendships and relationships and family, that if we can just check in with somebody and say, hey, this might be a little bit of a heavier conversation. Um, do you have time? And if not, when do you? And that, can be somebody who's responding to that. But I think that that's like we've talked about this whole time is creating space for people is one of the biggest ways of helping people heal.
Hmm. And that also reminded me of something else that another really good friend of mine in New York, all these New Yorkers, I love them, um, said to me last year, I think during, it really resonated with me. So it was during the throes of knee surgery, but they had said, I'm in a place right now where I'm like removing urgency. Like we were having one of those conversations like about life, about things that are difficult. And removing urgency also plays into that. Do you have space or slowness? Because if we take, like, when we are in a tough heightened, unregulated time, everything feels so pressing. And it feels like I need to fix this. I need to figure it out right now. And so we go to people and we like word vomit. And removing urgency is like one of the biggest skills that I have thought about over the last year, little less than a year, of like, let's just take that away. If this is a big problem tomorrow or a big problem in a week, then it is a really big problem. But let's just like take away that need to problem solve immediately because it really regulates your nervous system. It brings you back into your body and it makes you realize like this isn't as big as me in my mind right now.
Yeah, and I like a day-to-day approach in times like that too, of just whatever's happening today, because I think the problem is when we're not feeling well, mentally, emotionally, physically, and we would like to be feeling well, it's like this big gap of where we're at and where we'd like to be. And the only thing that's going to fill that gap is several days pieced together at a time where we're focusing on what we can control that day. And when we're just staring at the width and the distance to where we want to be, I think that's so much harder. And I think that prolongs our healing. I think it ruins all the time in between and it makes us feel really out of control in the process.
Completely. And I think also like going off of what you just said reminded me of something. Prolonging healing is like we're always looking for like we do this. Where's the healing? Where is me like running free, you know? And it's like it again, it is all such a process and a journey. But sometimes when you're doing really well is when your body and your mind and your spirit are like, okay, like you have found a really nice stable place in your life right now. We're going to go a little deeper and it's going to bring up some stuff that's even more rudimentary and more like deep, um, deep, like I haven't thought about this since I was 5 kind of stuff. And it will catch you by surprise. But that to me lately, at least in a better headspace, is like, okay, I'm maybe trying to heal through this really difficult, challenging thing because I've done such a good job to get me to a stable place where I can now access it. And kind of just like rewiring your brain and rewiring the way that you look at these really, really tough things. Like that happened to me recently over the holidays. I know we all deal with holiday stuff. And I was like having a lot of like really, really kid things come up, like really like, and I have been in therapy, I have done my work, and I'm like, why do I feel like I'm 8 right now? And I realized, and I looked around at my life and I was like, I've worked so hard to create a really stable, soft, safe place at home. That's why I like have created a place where I can now like do that little deeper step. And it's like, and it's okay, and just let yourself be sad and like depressed for a week and binge watch Ted Lasso. I don't know.
Great show. Um, yeah, it's funny because this last year I felt like a lot of inner child stuff come up,
Yeah.
and one of the things that I've been reading a lot about is like I don't know how to like say this in a way that like makes perfect sense. But the book I'm reading is NLP, The Essential Guide, and it's neurolinguistics programming, and it talks about when you're going into old or bad memories that your best way of processing the memory is actually to not be in an associated perspective. So an associated perspective is when I go back into the memory, I'm feeling it, I'm experiencing it, I'm watching it happen, or I'm like part of it. Like I'm getting the emotions of it. So when I'm in a bad memory, it feels like trauma, it feels scary, it feels like abandonment. I'm feeling all the feelings. And the guy said that if you zoom out and kind of almost like you just walked in the room and you're watching it happen, that you can remove yourself from re-experiencing those emotions, but take what you need to learn. And for whatever reason, every time I go into like a crappy memory or something that happened that got like triggered in me, I've been like just zooming out to like almost watch myself. And I just have the most compassion for myself right now. Like I just find that like watching those things happen, I'm like, oh my God, like I can't believe you fucking made it through that shit. Like that was awful. Like I have a different connection rather than just feeling that victim energy of like that shame, that sadness, that anger, whatever is going on. And I don't think there's anything wrong with processing those emotions if that works for you. But for whatever reason, this practice of just like stepping back for a second and just looking at myself in this like loving way
Mhm.
has been so healing for me. Like if we're talking childhood stuff of just pulling back and being like, "Oh, that really was awful. And I'm like really proud of you for dealing with it in that way or surviving in that way. Or I understand why you were closing your heart in that way." Like I just have a different sense of like compassion and understanding for myself that I haven't had in a long time.
Yeah, that's such a good point. When you can like care for that instead of shame, because shame is really hard to rework. And those are what you're experiencing almost in that first person. But if you can be the caretaker and you can be on the outside, I like that room image too. I think I'll use that because I have been like going through it with some of that kid stuff. And it's like, I think I spent maybe like 5 or 6 days of like feeling it. And
Yeah.
it doesn't it's good to let those feelings come up, but I almost was like, "Why? Like, why now? Like, why haven't I worked through this? Like, what is this trying to tell me?" And, that's again in our head, but if you can just be kinder and hold your little self and hold like more like you would never berate somebody or feel embarrassed for someone else in that situation and just remembering that is like a really hard thing to do when you're in it.
Yeah. And it's almost easier to like put yourself in a perspective where you can be a friend to yourself, or like
Mhm.
even how I would treat my kids if that same thing happened to them, of like, oh my god, it's not your fault. Or you have this different perspective when it's an outsider, and you actually problem solve better. Like if it's something
Mhm.
you've got going on and you're coming to me, I'm like, well, you just fucking stop. Like
Yeah.
it's so much easier for me to say because I'm not experiencing that negative emotion,
Yeah.
but also giving yourself like the ability to pull out and like observe. I've noticed, like, even just probably in the last month since I've started to play with that it's made a massive difference in a lot of different things in a lot of different areas of my life, and just even how I'm like loving myself and treating myself. Because you're totally right. As you feel more safe and stable, there's an opportunity for things to come up to clear. And that's what I think it is. It comes up to clear, but when we start to feel it come up, it's really tempting to make meaning of it, of like, I'm never
Mhm.
going to be in a great spot because I'm going to self-sabotage with bad memories when I am. Or, like it's easy to decide what that means instead of just saying, oh, fuck, we went through that. And here's, here's what I love. Here's what I learned.
Mhm.
Here's what I can observe.
I think like one of just like the biggest things about that again is I guess it's just very redundant, but allowing it to not just be a few like 1 day or 2 days, but again, that slowness of like, I probably spent, I don't know, 5 or 6 days, like just kind of sad. And it just said it. And I was just like, even to Amanda, because we're just like trying to do all of the stuff that we're always trying to do. I'm like, I'm just sad right now. And I just wasn't my typical self. Like, usually I am like pumped to go for a walk or be outside or eat dinner or just the smallest things. And it's just like, not making an excuse for it, not pretending, and just, oh, fuck it. I'm just sad right now. It's coming up. I'm sad. And that helps me anyway to, I think, heal a little bit more. And there's just like not being like too upset with myself. It's easy to say right now because I like feel like I kind of worked through it the last few weeks, but there's not, it's okay. You're not failing. Like you are not failing by having things come up. It's like you're not healing.
Yeah. Well, and again, it sounds like you didn't decide what it meant. And
Yeah.
you just allowed it. And like, to even circle back to like the beginning of this conversation, like you were just honest about it. And I think when you're fighting yourself and you have that dissonance inside yourself of like, this is what I'm feeling, this is how I feel I have to act, this is what I'm feeling, but I
Mhm.
shouldn't feel that way. Like when you create more like dissonance for yourself, more anxiety for yourself because you feel like you're supposed to be somewhere you're not actually, I think that makes it, like we're talking about prolonged healing, like easiest way to prolong your healing is to decide you should be somewhere else instead of accepting where you're at.
I have been stepping back from social media a little bit, but I am always down to connect with people, especially anyone that's listening to your podcast. Down to connect. So yeah, absolutely. Through social media is great.
So what's your handle so they can find you?
N Bondellio, my last name. And can you what do you do? Do you flash pictures? Do
I'll
you?
put it in the show notes. They'll be able to click.
Yeah.
Yeah, your last name's kind of wild. So I will I
Yeah.
will put that in the show notes. So anybody who's listening and was like, this resonated with me, make sure you reach out and let Nicole know and let me know by leaving a review. As always, we're so grateful for you. And I'm so grateful you agreed to this. This was fun.
Thank you for asking me. I adore you. I love you. Mwah.
Thanks for listening. Make sure to get a copy of my latest book, Rock Your Comeback, The Down-to-Earth Guide to Reclaiming Your Power, just about everywhere books are sold. Join the Comeback Club for exclusive access, masterclasses, and more. And I always love to know what you think, so make sure to shoot me a DM or leave me a review. Thanks for listening to the Rock Your Comeback podcast. I hope you're feeling inspired, motivated, and ready to take on the world. Now go step back into your power. The world's been waiting for you. But first, if you could, leave me a review or share with a friend. Thank you.